So to get us started, I would like to welcome Chris Sheard, who's going to be talking about skills and dispositions. Chris is the middle school principal at ACS Cobham.
Hello, I'm Chris Sheard. I'm the middle school assistant principal at ACS Cobham, not the principal, but thank you, Ben. I've been working in education for over 20 years, and I think anyone who does so has moments where they stop and look at the students that they're working with and decide that they need to reevaluate what they're doing or how they are approaching the lessons that they're delivering or how they're working with young people. I remember thinking back, about 4 years ago, one of my IB physics students came to me with a physics problem. It was long and complicated, and they wanted me to help them with that. And as a teacher, we all know that the first thing we do is look at it and think, I really hope that I can solve this problem myself. And then we look at it and think, right, now I know what strategy I'm going to use to solve this problem. How can I guide this student to realizing the same thing so that they then can work through the problem and solve it themselves? I'd only been thinking about it for about 30 seconds before the student interrupted my thought process and said, shall I just Google it, miss? No, was my instant reaction. We can do this, we can work through this together. I just wanted to work out how best to approach the problem. Now, this was a hard-working student. She was going out of her way to do additional problems in her own time, and she'd brought me one that she hadn't managed to overcome on her own, potentially. And she wasn't afraid of that 45 minutes time to work through the problem, but she had an impatience about her that she didn't realize how to work through that problem. She hadn't got the focus that I wanted to, the determination to say, right, what do I have in my toolkit that I can apply to this problem? And this is where we start to think about the students that we're working with, and for years it's been going on about 21st century skills and the soft skills. It's not the academics that we need to focus on anymore. All of that is available on Google. It's how we approach problems and how we actually endeavour to persist with a problem until we reach a solution and not just give up at the first hurdle. Historically, soft skills such as these have been assessed qualitatively, and they've been guided by opinion and observation. It leads us to looking at the whole picture of a student. You've got your classroom and you need to decide what leadership skills they have. You need to look at, are they good at organisation? Are they good at working in teams? And the big five starts being brought up as we work through, and we talk about agreeableness, we talk about the emotional stability, we talk about conscientiousness, we talk about the open-mindedness and extroversion. All of these skills are the big five, and this is what all schools are supposed to be leading towards. And schools are doing this. They're trying to plan to develop those skills within our young people. But as yet, we haven't been able to come up with quantifiable measures and ways to actually point the direction. We want to look at the bigger picture and say, well, I don't want to just observe and make assumptions and make a professional guess. I want to actually look at a bigger picture and draw back and think, okay, there is more information to be had, and I can actually see the evidence, and we have something more concrete and tangible to move forward with. Excuse me. What interests me in the project that I'm doing now is obviously looking at what Doha were doing with the mission skills assessment, and David Kinsella did his presentation this time last year talking about how the students in Doha had progressed through the project, and I was really interested to know how those student skills were being developed in Doha. One of the things that David said he wished he could have access to was individual data for those students and not just a whole school overview, which then is compared to other schools, which aren't necessarily easily comparable depending on the cohort that you're coming in. And Tessera came out in about 2016 with reports that they promised could give each student an individual profile on how they sit within those big five skills and dispositions, which they've actually split conscientiousness into two skill areas. But they promised to provide individual student information and targets and suggested strategies in which to improve. And they promised to give us a playbook of teacher instructions and guided suggestions on lesson plans so that the teachers could use that information to inform the students on how best to move forward. So with all of this information in mind, the decision was taken to start the process with grade 8 students. Being an important year for transition, going into high school, we need to look at those skills and dispositions that are going to take them moving forward into high school and then into later in life. And the project's title, How Can the Use of Tessera, Personalised Feedback Reports, Contribute to Grade 8 Students' Development of Skills and Dispositions Key to Middle to High School Transition. Quite a mouthful, I had to read it. But the point was, I didn't just want to bring in a program, apply it to the students, give them a test, set them some targets, give them the test again. Great, they've made some progress. We needed to look at, is this actually making a difference? Are we increasing the growth of those skills? Are we actually making a difference with the project that we're applying? Some of you, I can almost hear your skepticism and sitting there thinking, all right, extroversion, open-mindedness, these are personality traits. These can't be developed. This is what you're born with. We choose people for certain professions because they have these traits. And until recent years, that was generally the mindset that was held. But recent studies over the last 2 years have shown that these skills do develop over time for everybody, whether we make certain decisions to do so or not. So this project becomes even more exciting as we start to think, well, maybe we can target these skills and start guiding the students in the direction that they wish to go. So the idea is the students would receive a test, we would use the playbook to guide the students' development in the 5 skills, and as I said, they are shown to grow over time anyway, so again, it's an interesting one to decide if our interventions are making that growth happen or developing it better than what their natural progression would be. The only one that tends to decline is openness, apparently at about the age 50. So just a bit of information there. This is particularly interesting because not only are we expected as a leading school to be planning to develop these 21st century skills, or the Big 5, but NEASC and other accreditation bodies are expecting these schools to not only plan to address them, but they are also expecting to see evidence of assessment of the skills and targeting the skills and growth of the skills, which is what this programme suggested that it would be able to provide. So with that in mind, we need to look at the pathways and what we've actually done along the journey. I'm going to outline the whole procedure so far, and we have encountered a few hiccups along the way, which I'm not going to go into too much detail because of time constraints, and then I'll talk to you a little bit about some of the data that we've got, depending on how I'm doing for time. I'll expect a nod if you want me to cut it down. So we started with a teacher presentation to inform them, followed by a survey through Google Forms to gauge what their level of interest or skepticism of the programme was and what their understanding of the skills that we were trying to address. We then gave out a parent information sheet to the students, along with a consent form to sign. The consent form was not for doing the test. This was something as educators we decided we wanted to do, and this was made clear to the students that it was happening anyway, signed form or no signed form. But what it did do is it gave us an opportunity to share a very initial piece of information with the parents. So this went home and they were immediately interested in the project, or hopefully at least alerted to the fact that something different was happening. We then gave student surveys to gauge again their awareness of the skills and what they felt their level of competency was. And we then gave them the Tessera test. We did this over a couple of weeks. One of the glitches was that we had all 4 schools under the same testing window, so we had to try and coordinate between all 4 schools to make sure that everybody was completing them at the same time. Tessera wouldn't generate the individual student reports until everybody was completed, but we made it on time. The reports didn't then come back into us until just before the Christmas holidays, and because we wanted to actually focus the work with the reports, we decided to wait until January before we gave those to the students. I did receive a few emails from parents wondering where those reports were, so it was already on the radar, which was promising. We then gave the students back their reports in January, along with a PowerPoint presentation which was adapted with the grade level team in Cobham to make sure that it was student-friendly and available to use. All of the resources that were developed were shared with all 4 schools, and they were given the freedom to apply the program as they saw fit. The testing windows were fixed, but how they used the playbooks and how they administered the teacher surveys and the student surveys was up to them, as long as the timeline was broadly in line with what we wanted. Again, some hiccups occurred with map testing alignment and delays with Doha coming back after the summer holidays. So then the students received their reports. They were told to take them home and get their parents to sign them. Once again, this is just trying to get the parents engaged with the report themselves and actually see what the information was, trying to get the students to share with them that data. They were then brought back into school. Some of them might not have had a parent's signature on them that was real, but we don't know. So a couple of weeks later, we then sent the parent survey out via email just to gauge their level of interest or knowledge of what was going on. We did very rapidly receive some emails saying, I haven't seen this report yet, please could you send me a copy, which was quite easy to do. We just sent it via PDF along with the student how to read your report information. We then a lot of data was then sent to David Furlow. One of our hiccups was that the Tessera data itself was put under all 4 schools together. So we couldn't then generate a one school overview. Instead, it was all 4 schools together. And, you know, I know we're one organisation, but the schools themselves have their individual traits. Because of this oversight or error in the first data input, it led to a positive for us because they then were quite happy to share all of the raw data to David Furlow, who did some amazing analytical work using Tableau. And he's done presentations to the heads of school, the principals. He's also come in and worked with grade level teams in Cobham Middle School to share that data with them and to show them how it might correlate. David's favourite phrase is, I'm not trying to make inferences or suggestions about what the data tells you, I'm just shining a light on the data and showing you what might be interesting or worth a conversation. This led to some teachers being so interested in it that David actually gave them training and licenses on using that Tableau data so that they can manipulate the data and have a look at it themselves. We then are then at the stage where we're supposed to be having our final Tessera testing stage. This should have happened a couple of weeks ago, but this tiny little hiccup called GDPR has stood in our way. But Tessera are back on board and they have promised us that they will be compliant by September next year. So our second level of testing will take place in September for the grade 9 students. And I've already had teachers in grade 8 asking me, make sure that you share that data with us so that we can see if there's any growth. Okay, going back to just some of the data that I've got, the student survey, 263 students gave responses. 3/4 of them felt that these skills and dispositions were important, and they also rated themselves as good or very good in all of them. And they felt that they could give good examples of how to develop in all of those skills. So it will be interesting to see what the post-intervention data gives on that. But at the moment, we're looking at a very healthy, well-adapted skill set of students that know what they're doing. The teacher presentations, we had 48 teachers respond to the presentations, and they're middle school teachers, so they do as they're told. So we had a very, very good rate of return on that one. And of those teachers, 3/4 of them felt that they did have an understanding of how to prepare, deliver, and develop all of those skills. The lowest one, which was sitting at about 70%, was the tenacity and grit. They felt a little bit less confident with that. And their highest one, they felt they were very good at developing leadership skills. With the teachers, their main concern was time to implement it, having the resources to implement it, and also having quantitative data. They were concerned that that wouldn't exist. Remember, this was before the test was done, so this was just trying to find where their cynical side was or where their skepticism was. The parent survey, 32% of the ACS Cobham parents that were surveyed responded, which isn't bad considering our parents, sometimes opt out. So 32% responded. Of that 32%, over half of them said they didn't know what our expected school-wide learning results were about. And similarly, about half of them said they considered skills and dispositions when choosing out of school hours activities for their students to do. So they're thinking about these big 5, but they're not making that connection with the ESLers. 3/4 of the parents, or over 3/4 of the parents, said that they would like to find out more about the tessera, and about 80% of them said that they would like to know how to enhance these skills and dispositions for themselves with their kids at home. I have more information, but I'm very aware of time, so I think I'm going to take you back to this original slide, which was created using the the level descriptors for the ESLRs. So I thought that was quite nice, and I like the fact that it's got individual right in the middle there. But thank you very much for listening, and look forward to seeing your questions.
Thank you, Chris.